the Tourism AI podcast, where we talk about all things at the intersection of tourism and artificial intelligence. And today we are joined by Lian Dumouchel, who is a really amazing person that I'm really excited to actually, this is probably, Lian, the conversation I've been most excited to have for a while, mostly because we had a good conversation at the Tourism Industry Association BC conference, where you told me about all this cool, innovative stuff you were working on and doing. And so I was really excited to talk to you. So for context, Lian is a teaching professor at Thompsons River University in Kamloops and focused on teaching tourism and tourism marketing, correct? Yeah. So why don't I kind of pause there and just let you say hello and maybe give a more proper introduction to kind of what you do, where you came from, and how long you've been.
Okay. Thanks. Well, thanks, Peter, for inviting me. This is fun. We were supposed to do this last month, I think, in Vancouver at the conference, but better late than never, right?
Exactly.
So I am a teaching professor in the tourism management department here at Thompson Rivers University. I've been teaching here for over 30 years, actually. I started probably when I was in kindergarten. I'm I think now the more senior faculty member in our department. We're actually the only program area in Canada in tourism that's independent and not affiliated or under any other, business school. So we're quite privileged. I teach mostly in the area of entrepreneurship, marketing, small business management in the tourism space. It's a wonderful experience. I'm really lucky to be here, and I've had a wonderful ride so far.
That's awesome. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think fun fact, I guess, is I think you probably have taught many of the people we work with at CIPR Communications and at Tourism at the association, the network. Certainly many people at Tourism Kamloops who we've worked closely with say nothing but amazing things about you, Lian. So you have a great reputation amongst the people we know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else you would like? One other fun fact maybe you'd like to know is that when I started teaching, personal computers were still brand new. And I started teaching actually before the internet was accessible. During my first 5 years here at TRU, we started using the internet. So this is a new wave now for me, and quite exciting. So as I said, I've been privileged to be an educator during times of upheaval and change.
Yeah, which have been constant in your entire tenure, right? Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really awesome starting point, Lian, because to your point, it was analog to digital to now AI, which is quite a remarkable shift and a remarkable change. So, we'll jump into that journey a little bit, but I want to just talk about something because I think everything's always meant to be, and the timing of this just meant to be. Because just yesterday I saw on your LinkedIn that you posted that you put out the marketing map, navigating the principles of marketing for tourism, hospitality, and services. So why don't you maybe introduce the marketing map, just kind of give us the 30,000-foot view of what it is, and then we'll dive into a little.
Well, I've been teaching principles of marketing for tourism, hospitality, and services for 30 years. And initially I taught it using textbooks that were longstanding. And over the years, textbooks became very expensive, and I started using open educational resources past, I would say, 10, 15 years. And those were basically books that were written to be shared for free. And the problem with those resources is that they were very generic and not very tailored to the needs of my students and my programs. And so I would have to develop additional teaching materials for students. And I did that for about 15 years, to the point where I had collected a lot of my own stuff. And the timing was right. I started using AI tools, and my term as department chair was over. And so it was like the perfect storm. I was approved for a sabbatical, and I said, okay, I'm going to take a dive, and I'm going to actually write a textbook for my program, my students. And I realized that there are many other programs across Canada that were in a similar place. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, this is it. I wasn't too sure what I was getting myself into, but this is an open textbook, which means it's shareable freely. You could copy it, use it, adapt it, share it, as long as you give me credit. But that's all there is. There's no cost to anybody. And we launched it in January, soft launch. I tested it out in my class this past semester. and I shared it with colleagues across Canada and beyond, and I got some feedback. And so just this month, actually, we did the official launch. And so the current version has been updated, tweaked, corrected, whatever was wrong. And here we are. So I decided to share it a little more purposefully. And because I'm not selling it, it's basically out there through my social media and the university's open press, whose purpose is also to share educational resources freely. So here we are.
Well, congratulations on the launch, on the textbook, on the our hard launch, I guess. I started to kind of dig through it a little bit. I only saw it yesterday, so I didn't have that much time, but it looks
Okay.
really practical and really useful and helpful. So I think it's gonna help a lot of students.
Mhm.
I guess my before we even get into my list of questions that I sent you, I told you we're not going to stick to my script. I'm curious about, obviously, you just kind of gave a bit of an evolution of the
Yes.
textbook itself, right?
Yes.
And that's just kind of an interesting story, I think, in context of like the technology conversation I want to have with you. So how do you see, for example, like you mentioned textbooks, now there's these like open resource kind of textbooks. And do you see this evolving in the education space in general with sort of the advent of AI?
Yes, it's actually accelerating it. So I've been thinking about writing a textbook for a long time. Typically it takes, a few years to actually get something, you want to say, market ready.
Hmm.
With open educational resources, the standards are not as high, and so you'll see a lot of, you want to say, open resources that are varied quality.
Hmm.
And again, I didn't want to produce something that was not up to my personal standards. And so the timing was right because I started seeing how I could use AI tools to help accelerate the process. I wasn't sure how it was going to work exactly because the idea came to me in 2023 as I was experimenting with Perplexity AI. I was experimenting with ChatGPT. Those were my two go-tos initially, but I saw that I could probably use those tools to speed things up, and it did. So if you want to know what ended up happening is that over 2024, I discovered that, anyways, ChatGPT and Perplexity AI were evolving quickly. As I was fooling around and testing and trying things out, I discovered that those two tools were excellent research assistants for me.
Yeah.
This is really what happened. I was able to do things that would take me normally months. I was able to do things in a couple of days, if not less. So, for example, Perplexity became my number one tool because early on, that was the only tool that was actually plugged into the internet that would show me where its sources were, which was super important for me because I'm a details fanatic. Like I needed to make sure that my facts were straight, that everything was verified, that whatever information I put in, and this is the way I am as an educator, that the information was legit, that
Yeah.
it was real, and that it was, you want to say, of good quality. Basically, well 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 respected in the academic world. So Perplexity checked all of my references. It checked my, let's just say, I'm a fact checker extraordinaire, and so I needed to make sure that anything with my name attached to it was something that I was comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
here.
I'm curious about that process because then I think in context of tourism operators, destinations, I think taking it outside of the academic realm a little bit. But obviously these tools are very powerful research tools. And before we hit play on record on this conversation, I was telling you about a project I'm working on, all the deep research I'm doing. And yeah, to your point, I mean, stuff that would have taken me almost a year, I'm doing in like a week. Like it's crazy how much research you can get. But I'm curious from your experience and obviously writing a textbook that's, to your quality standards in an academic setting, how do these tools do in terms of, first of all, finding academically credible information? And, were you doing a lot of vetting and removing sources that
Yes.
were like, was there a lot of sources that you had to remove from your research?
Yeah, until I learned how to use. So I'm going to talk mainly about Perplexity AI at the beginning because in early 2024, that was a tool that I was able to check my sources with carefully. I learned that I could tell Perplexity AI where to look. I could tell it that I only wanted to look at academic resources, or I could tell it I only wanted to look in certain areas. So I learned that I could steer it in the right direction. And I did early on. I said, I only want things that, for example, are available through Google Scholar or have been verified that way. And so that's the only place it looked at. And then when I wanted something a little more current or something a little more in the popular press, again, I would direct it to look there. And so it gave me, you want to say, a theory and research from verified sources that were peer reviewed. And then it gave me examples when I asked for examples, again, from sources that I dictated. And because I'm familiar with this space, I was able to filter out things that, and basically train it to look at places, you want to say, sources that are credible. And I learned to do that. I think I got pretty good at it.
I'm sure you did.
So over time, new Perplexity AI was trained to look where I wanted it to look. And the other thing I did is I would repeat searches multiple times, refine and search again and again. And if I wasn't happy with the results, I would make it do it again. So in my acknowledgments, I acknowledge that my AI tools are very patient with me.
Yes.
And actually, recently, I asked ChatGPT to describe my style. And it did identify that I was a tireless fact checker. I would check everything multiple times until I was confident with my background that the information was valid and it's something that would be aligned with my values. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. And I think there's a couple kind of things I want to point out in terms of what you said. So first of all, being a subject matter expert is really important, right?
Yes.
And so as we're using these AI tools, you being a subject matter expert on the topic have the ability to filter out what's real, what's not, what's good, what's quality, what's all that stuff.
Yes.
And I think that's a very important piece for I see a lot of people, doing a lot of things in areas they have zero idea what they're talking about, zero business doing anything in there. And I'm, in fairness, I'm trying to build something in an area I've never done what I'm trying to do before. But what I've done is I've surrounded myself with some experts. So I have, for example, a guy named Jeremy, who's my technical person. In fact, I just sent him something ChatGPT wrote, and he's like, really good directionally, but here's some things I would like sort of fine tune it with or whatever, right?
Yes.
So that's number one, is like subject matter expertise is probably more important now because you can very quickly get sent in the wrong direction in a very compelling way. So that's important. I think number two is iteration, right?
Yes.
Going back and iterating and keep going, right? And so obviously the tools don't just magically do all the work for you, right? I think that's a big perception out there is, can you just get it to magically just do the thing for me? And, we're not there yet. Maybe we'll get there one day, but be iterative. The other question I have regarding this process, because I'm curious, is, how did you manage to use the AI tools? And I'm assuming probably ChatGPT in this case, but I could be wrong, to kind of create consistency in your outputs. Like, did you write it with ChatGPT or did you write it outside of the tools?
So I had it. Okay, so remember, I've been teaching this course for a long time, and I have my own material.
Right.
And so my material fed everything.
Gotcha.
What ChatGPT and Perplexity AI did is help me organize the information.
Yeah.
I asked it to check if I missed a point, but I was the writer.
Right.
This is interesting because it doesn't have my voice. I didn't have it at the time. And I didn't so when I asked it to give me examples, it worded it in ways that I would never speak. And what's interesting is my students commented on the fact that the book is in the voice that I use in the classroom. And so they recognize me there.
Yeah.
And so it gave me, the tools I used gave me structure, made sure that I didn't miss a point. I reordered things about 20, 30 times. I don't remember how many times. I added and excluded things. And so it kind of was my sounding board. I would upload stuff and asked it, did I miss a point? Could we reshape? And so maybe the order of things were fed. I've asked it for examples. So it gave me like 30, 40 examples, and some of them were meh. And so I was able to pull from there. So it was, you want to say, it did all the grunt work for me.
Yeah,
but
totally.
At the end of the day, it was my voice, my words, the way I communicate, and in the order I communicate. So it was great because I could revise, rework, but ultimately the voice is mine. Every word that's in that book is something that would comes out of my mouth.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. Yeah. And that's a really kind of helpful context too, because I think, again, when even outside of academia, if people are using these tools, really, again, you're the subject matter expert. It's your voice or your brand's voice,
Yes.
your organization's voice. And to your point, the tools can just assist and do I like the words grunt work because it's a way I look at it, right?
Although I have to say that fast forward to 2025, April 2025, the tools have evolved to the point where if I've been working them for long enough, they can actually speak in my voice. But
They remember everything, right?
when I did the work originally, the tools were not there.
Yeah.
And so I could tell you, maybe next time around, it'll be a different process. But right now, the product that's out there was mainly written by me with a lot of fact-checking, organization, and you want to say finessing with AI tools.
Yeah. Perfect. I got a follow-up question again. We're not even going to follow my script at all because that's just how these things go. But I think this is a better conversation. Copyright. So one of the things that people struggle with a lot, or I don't even want to say struggle, but they'll put barriers in front of their AI use because copyright. And so I know the answer to this question, but I'd be curious your perspective on copyright. Obviously, your book is copyrightable, I'm assuming, or
no, it's open. It's
I see. It's not even a concern.
Again, but everything that's in there is freely shareable. And so, for example, all of the images can be shared, no problem. All of the videos that are there have been vetted. So there's nothing copyrightable in that book. Nothing.
Okay.
And that took me a heck of a long time. And I have to say, I really, really appreciate the work, again, of Perplexity AI to help me find open source audiovisual support. And that's when I discovered Napkin AI, which is another tool that I use forever, because there are a lot of diagrams that I couldn't use because they were copyrightable. So I created my own. Since I understand the subject, Napkin AI helped me create my own diagrams and visuals to support everything.
Fantastic.
And so it's all open and freely shareable.
Okay, nice. All right. Well, that was not the answer necessarily. I was
you were looking for, but that's a space where yes.
Yeah. No, but that's actually fantastic, and I love that you did it that way. I actually love that it's like so fully open. From just, I guess, for context for people, right now the Canadian Copyright Act, I guess, sort of is actually doesn't explicitly talk about necessarily this, but there is a difference between AI generated works and AI assisted works. And so I would argue by just the way you described your process, that if you wanted to go get copyright for this book, you probably would be successful, or no, you don't think so?
Well, the book, yes, but the thing is the contents inside, so the visuals that I use that are open are not copyrightable. So I would not.
Right. Those ones
would be.
If
you want to put it that way, I would not, because I'm using them because they're not copyrightable.
Right. On purpose. Yes.
On purpose.
That makes
sense.
I
would have to remove all of the visuals that I borrowed from Pexels and from all of the other you want to say repositories that where I spent hours and days and days and days filtering through to find the right images that I could use.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. How is that conversation, though, in academia? Like, obviously, you made a very conscious choice in the way you wrote this book to make it completely open.
Yes.
Is this a concern in academia overall, the copyright? And what's your perspective on, I guess, the future of copyright in this new AI era that we're in?
Well, for me, I think anything that's for educational purposes should be open. That's my view. That unless you're planning to commercialize anything, which is a different conversation. But in where I live and work, commercializing is not my priority. It's not even on my agenda. That's not something I'm personally interested in or professionally right now. And so I want to make sure that whatever educational resources I produce can be shared freely. Now, if somebody is, for example, planning to create an invention or something that they do want to commercialize, then that's a whole different process and a whole different conversation. But using AI to produce it might make it challenging for them to protect.
Yeah.
If somebody else can duplicate it again,
the distinction in jurisprudence, according to the Supreme Court, if it's like an AI assisted work and you can kind of prove that there was humans, it's really a human work that AI helped with, and you likely can get subject to copyright protection, right? That's sort of the way the law is kind of currently laid out. And we're expecting probably after this federal election that's coming soon for probably the next government to deal with the Copyright Act in context of this whole AI revolution, because there's a lot of, it's a big topic, right? And there's a lot of controversy around these tools and how they were trained and where they got their information from. And so, I mean, it's going to have to be addressed. So
I see that world being transformed in the next few years. I don't know where and how,
yeah,
but because of AI tools that are gaining, you want to say, in terms of capabilities and applications, I don't know where the conversation is going to go.
yeah, likely not the same as it is today, right?
No.
So I want to maybe just switch a little bit here and ask you this question. So if person only had one time to read one chapter of your book, which chapter
Yes.
would you direct?
I'd say it depends what you want to get out of it. And so if you want to get a big picture, you have no idea what marketing is, then I would do the foundations. If you have particular interests, for example, I'd say the next most important one I would say would be the navigating with data, market research. I think responsible use and understanding how to be an educated and critical consumer of information, of marketing information, that might be the next one. But each chapter has its own purpose. And I see that, the Open Pressbooks has the capability for me to track which chapters are being visited. I saw there's certain chapters that are more visited than others, and I don't know why. So I'm assuming that people have particular needs. For example, the pricing chapter has been, I don't know why. And so I guess it depends on your goal, your objectives, and what you're looking for.
I love that. I love that you get feedback. That's awesome.
You
Like kind
can
of like that sort of
track it,
data, right?
actually I know which chapters Perplexity has guided people towards, or
Interesting.
even Google searching or whatever. So the you see, data analysis is
It's everything.
wonderfully powerful.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. Actually, switching to that a little bit, because one of the things that, and this is not, again, not on our question list here, so sorry.
Okay.
But one of the things you talked about when we were at the TIABC conference there was some of the work you're doing with students around synthetic data,
Yes.
sort of all that kind of stuff. So I would love if you're open to describing that process a little bit for you to talk about that, because that really got my attention.
Is that right? Eh? So I have to preface this that we were all exploring, because I
Yes.
had one of my big problems from past years was, again, responsible primary research. We do know that, the expression garbage in, garbage out. So the same thing goes with doing research. If you don't know what you're doing, you might be misled by the output. So that said, after 30 years of seeing students tripping over themselves and trying sometimes to find shortcuts to do their surveying, for example, we really couldn't rely on the output that they produced. And so this year, my goal was it's not a research methods class. I taught a new venture creation class. And part of that process requires students to validate their assumptions about what their ideal customer would like. And I had just learned about a synthetic data. And so I looked into it and discovered that researchers are increasingly accepting or testing AI for producing, I want to say, or mimicking what survey respondents would answer. Now, this is not a perfect output, but for a first step, it's becoming more and more accepted, especially for testing your ideas in the early stages before you actually go out into the field and test it on real people. And so for my purposes, this was an ideal opportunity to try it out. Yeah. Because my students didn't have a lot of time, but I wanted them to see what the tools are like, what that research process is in accelerated time. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I did some quick homework, and I have to tell you, I wasn't 100% sure what the outcome would be. Our students had created, AI-assisted personas for their new business ideas. And we had AI develop surveys for these personas to test the product. And then we asked AI to have 100 versions of their personas answer the survey as if they were 100 different people. And the output was amazing because the students had an opportunity to develop surveys, test them, and see what made a good survey versus a weak one. We had time to actually test it out. Right. They had the opportunity to see how an AI assisted persona would answer the survey. Because sometimes, you design a survey, you hand it out, and you realize your questions are poorly designed, or
Right.
that they can't answer them, or you're leading them a little bit. And
Right.
so this is a wonderful time to test how valid your survey is and see how people would answer it, people with the characteristics of your ideal consumer. And so we were able to do that in a very short period of time, get some output that was probably way better than something they would have done initially or
Yeah.
historically. Because I have to tell you, some of the survey results that I've seen over the years were pretty poor.
Right.
So this is way better than anything our students have ever done before. And the students got a chance to see early results.
Yeah.
So if they do want to, again, validate even further, then they could take this work and actually do it in real life. But at least they got the kinks out early on. And so that was fantastic. And this whole area is exploding right now and becoming more and more, because again, I wanted to check to see if this was something that was legitimate, that was being recognized as valid. And yes, it is. For early stage research, excellent. And so for me, it was great. And the students were blown away by the output.
That's awesome. Yeah. So is that a methodology? Obviously, it's not as easy just to just go out and do it, but like from a product development, in tourism, for example, hey, I want to go and, maybe I want to add something new. I want to change something. I want to do whatever. Do you think this would be a good methodology for, tourism operators, DMOs to sort of apply
because
and
it's low cost.
Yeah.
First of all, it's not like we didn't buy a software to do this. Actually, I use an approach that somebody I follow. I follow a lot of, AI YouTubers or whatever. Anyways, so they suggested that we ask AI for an ideal prompt. And so that's what we did. So we asked ChatGPT, we asked Google AI Studio, we asked Perplexity, we asked Claude, we asked Grok. We tried all the tools and we asked them what would be an effective prompt to develop. So we actually asked the tool to recommend prompts and what kind of information that they would need in order to create a synthetic persona. And they actually gave us insights that we tweaked and then actually applied the prompt that they recommended.
Nice.
And so this is really experimental because I didn't know. I mean, I did it at home myself. I test everything in advance. But you do know that every time you ask AI something, it might not give you the same answer. And so when I had a whole class full of students testing this on different platforms, we had a good range of answers.
Yeah.
Which then gave the students some insights on the capabilities. So for example, Google AI Studio gave the most justification.
Okay.
It said, this is the prompt you should use because, and it gave us like 5 pages of justification. This was before deep thinking was available.
Right.
Yeah. And so it was really amazing because then the students got to compare notes and we went step by step forward. So it's not like I sent them off to do the work on their own. We did a lot of the work together and compared notes as we were doing it. And because it's so quick to get results, in a 3-hour class, we were able to do a lot of work.
Amazing stuff. Yeah. Well, it's interesting what you're describing, and obviously the classroom is the perfect setting for this type of experimentation. But when I consult with tourism businesses about, using AI, learning how to use AI, implementing AI, like what you're describing is exactly what businesses should be doing, right? It's like, okay, what's a business problem we want to solve? Everybody go off and use AI to come and figure out how to solve the business problem. Now let's get together and let's talk about it and collaborate on it and come up with the best solution, right? Like it's a very team-driven, iterative process to get to a really great result at the end with a lot of assistance. That's really the path forward, right? So it's cool. And I think what's cool about your position is you get to potentially sort of, as the technology improves, you get to almost run the same prompt year over year and see how it's changing, right? So I expect things just to get better and better on that front, right?
And I discovered that because for a while, everybody was advocating for developing expertise in prompting. Well, now where the AI tools have more deep thinking capabilities, they help you create a prompt. They help you more. Prompting becomes, the skill of prompting becomes less important, and the conversation becomes more important. The conversation you're having with the tool. It seems kind of creepy sometimes because it's not a human, but at the same time, you're having a conversation.
That's right.
And again, learning to have that conversation and not taking a first answer, but saying why, asking why, asking why. Quite interesting
It
to
is. It
see.
is.
And this in the last month, I would tell you, because
I
during the
know.
semester, it wasn't possible. There was
Yeah.
no deep thinking.
Yeah.
But now I'm seeing that, oh, I don't have to worry so much about how I word this prompt
Right.
because we could craft it together, which
Yeah.
was something that, again, 3-4 months ago, I would not have
You couldn't even
imagined.
do, right? Yeah, it's pretty
No.
amazing. Yeah, no, and I honestly, like, one of the main prompts I teach people is use a reasoning model and ask it, say, describe your job, describe your role, describe your job, describe your goals in your job, and ask it what it needs, ask it to create basically a prompt or a context document on how it can be most helpful to help you achieve your goals in
Yes.
your profession, right? And like that's such a great starting point prompt. And then what we do is we get people to create what's called context briefs. So it's like, okay, here's a brief for this part of my job, and here's a brief for this part of my job, and here, right? And you create all these context briefs. Now you can start to build projects or GPTs or
Yes.
whatever that are custom built for you, your job, your goals, and then like the AI can help you build the entire thing from ground
That's
up, right?
right.
It's
That's right.
amazing. Yeah, yeah. So no, it's awesome to hear you. You're kind of doing it in that way. So we are running out of time, but I want to ask maybe one more question here out of the list. I'm going to go back to the list, even though we've barely touched it. Because honestly, Lian, like what you're doing is so refreshing. It's so awesome. I love it so much, and I'm just like, it's so great for tourism to have students graduating with the types of things you're teaching and the methodologies, because that's just going to accelerate the industry a lot. I'm curious about how you fit in the context of the advanced education system. And obviously, I'm assuming you're on the leading edge of things relative to some of your colleagues. How are your colleagues viewing that? Like, how is education, without sort of naming anybody, but how is education viewing this and the work you're doing compared to others, I guess?
My. Right now, it's like the Wild West. I remember I'm having flashbacks to when I started teaching, and this is pretty much happening again. We have a small number of us who are curious and trying things and tripping over ourselves a little bit. Because I have to tell you, I've had some interesting days. But sometimes I feel a bit alone. I think I'm the only one in my department right now who's taken a dive to such point. I share information with my colleagues and they're waiting. Basically, they're waiting for time off to catch up. And I think they're going to feel a bit overwhelmed. But that was the same thing when I started teaching. So I came from industry and I was using a personal computer and I was using spreadsheet software, word processing, presentation software when very few people were doing that. And so over time they caught up. So now we're in the same place now. People are nervous. Some people are scared. They know change is coming and they're going to be kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, it's going to be painful for some people. I know
It is.
you're coming out of time, and I
It's
think
okay. I got a few
universities
more
are trying
minutes.
to figure out what to do. Because right now nobody's telling me what I can and cannot do in my university. Some universities are gone a bit ahead. For example, UBC has put in some policies on AI use in the classroom.
Mhm.
We don't have yet. I'm expecting we're going to get some guidelines, but I think that's as far as, on responsible use, things like that. But at TRU, small universities, we're not quite there yet. So it's like the Wild West right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And so my big priority is to make sure that my students become AI literate and they learn the responsible use. That to me is those are the two big number ones. Because I don't want them to think of this as an avenue for cheating, but it's a tool to help them amplify their learning. And so here we are, kind of
Here we are. Yeah, no. And you know
scary
what? Like
times.
everything you just described, as much as it describes academia and academia's sort of, I guess, place in this whole thing, it really describes the whole world, really. At the end of the
Yeah,
day, we're still in my opinion, in my assessment of things, we're just out of the early innovator stage and just starting to get into the early adopters phase of
yeah,
AI. So we still have a long way to go.
yes,
And the technology is moving way faster than humans are. And there's people like us that are just like all in head first, see where this goes. And then there's the rest of the world who, are just either interested, curious, or gonna kick and scream to the very bitter end and adopt it when they absolutely
yeah.
have to, right?
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, but I mean, what's interesting about this particular change, I think, is that it's so transformative compared to even the internet, which was very transformative. I think my opinion is the potential of transformation with AI
Yes.
is just so much bigger. It's sort of in my opinion at least, it's the companies that really take the right actions now, and universities and professors and everybody else, that have a real big opportunity to kind of like lead into a completely new world. It's
But
interesting
it's
time.
scary because it's happening way faster than any previous wave we've experienced. And
That's
I
right.
think that's what's scaring, what's really, really overwhelming for many.
It is. It is. And it's, I'm sure you feel the same way. It's overwhelming for me every day. I always get into a moment where I'm like, wow, I can't believe I just did that. That is a great, like I was just telling you before this call, we just hooked up our G drive to our ChatGPT, certain files in our G drive, and now it's like what it's doing is just blowing my mind right now. So that's just as of yesterday. So
Okay.
every day
That's
is an
okay.
opportunity to have your mind completely blown and to sort of reposition what you thought was possible, right?
It's true.
Nice.
And now I'm diving into using agents, which is again mind blowing because it's forcing me to rethink again. So
Okay.
the earth is always moving.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. Nice. Awesome. Well, Leanne, I really appreciate it. I actually hope that we can have this conversation like maybe on a bit of a regular basis because I think you have a lot to offer. And honestly, if you're a tourism student or maybe even if you've been in the industry for 30 years, you might want to go and take Leanne's class to sort of get the AI tune-up to everything because I think what you're doing is amazing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. It's been great.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye bye.